Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. I will call the meeting of the Minnesota Supervised Release Board to order. Today is Friday, May 23rd, 2025. We have three cases that will be coming before the board today. We will start out by a roll call. Member Christine Bray is absent and excused. Member Joe Earhart. Member Andrew Larson.
Here online.
Member Cheryl Ramstead.
Here.
And Paul Schnell is present. Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum of members to proceed. And with that, we will go to the first hearing. I'll turn it over to you, Andrew.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. I'm Andrew Carlton, the Assistant Director of the Hearings and Release Unit.
He's not here yet.
Oh, he's not on yet?
Who's Lake is on, but he's not in the room yet.
Okay. All right. We'll stand by.
Andrew, when you talk, make sure you push the button.
Was that online?
Yeah, I got it.
Say, okay, I'm there.
Okay, we can hear you here. We're just waiting for him to be brought into the room there, Moose.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Excuse me, Moose Lake, can you move that chair from the front?
No. No, they are moving.
Say Josh.
That's, it's actually Andrew.
Andrew. Very
Yes.
good. Say, can you please remove that chair that's in front of the table there? Correct, yep. Thank you.
Yes.
Riley. Please have a seat over here. In front of the camera. Over here. Over here. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome.
Okay. Very good. Hello, Mr. Riley.
Hello.
Hi, and good morning again to everyone. I am Andrew Carlson. I'm the Assistant Director of the Hearings and Release Unit. We are here today to review Mr. Adrian Riley. Mr. Riley, you are present and participating by video from the Minnesota Correctional Facility in Moose Lake. Mr. Riley's advocate and mother, Mary Riley, is also present, and she's participating by video. Hello, Ms. Riley. Thank you so much for participating today.
Thank
Here
you.
with
Good
me-
morning.
Good morning. Ms. Riley, if you could just mute yourself online there, you'll have an opportunity to talk, but that would be helpful. Thank you. Here with me at the at the Minnesota DOC Central Office is our Commissioner and Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell, along with board members Cheryl Ramstead and board member Joe Earhart. Member Andrew Larson is participating by video. Our records indicate that on May 24th, 1995, the Carver County Sheriff's Department were dispatched to an address on Navajo Avenue in Watertown Township. The deputies arrived and found 3 adult victims who had been shot to death. Mr. Adrian Riley was later arrested when he was found hiding in the attic of a residence in South Minneapolis by the Minneapolis SWAT team. A pistol identified as the murder weapon was also located in a bed under a mattress at that same address. On May 10th, 1996, Mr. Riley was found guilty of first-degree murder in Carver County District Court. In accordance with Minnesota Criminal Code, Mr. Riley was sentenced to serve a 30-year minimum life sentence. Mr. Riley has served a total of approximately 30 years of incarceration, and as of today, he has become eligible for parole on that life sentence. And he has 2 additional life sentences to serve consecutive to his current life sentence. Mr. Riley has had 1 prior review of his life sentence, and today's review is his first review by the Supervised Release Board. Thank you. I turn this matter over to the board. Commissioner?
Thank you so much. Good morning, Mr. Riley. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm okay.
All right. I'd like to just start out by asking you to tell today's meeting.
Commissioner Schnell, you cut out.
Okay. I would like to just be able to have you start out by talking about what it is you would like to see happen as a result of today's meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, today I would like to have the board to abrogate my sentences and grant me parole and or admit me down to custody level.
So just one of the things I want to make sure you understand in terms of our ability to collapse sentences, I think is what you're requesting, right? That you would like them made concurrent by the board. Is that my understanding?
Correct. That's my understanding is having them aggregated, meaning run into a fixed sentence.
Yeah, and one of the things is that the board would not I just want to be really clear up front that the board would not have authority to do that in your case. It does have some ability to collapse sentences when we are talking about those who were certified as adults, juvenile certified as adults, but that is not the fact set in your case. So I just want to be clear about what the scope of authority that the board actually would have in your case. And that would really be to make a determination on parole in the first life sentence. Questions about that? I just want to make sure you understand what authority the board has.
Okay.
So you just want to talk a little bit about, what you've been doing, the change that has occurred over the last 30 years, just where you see yourself and the change over time.
Well, the change over time, I came in a teenager, and I was young, and I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't have any knowledge of self. I didn't have an education, and so I made a lot of bad decisions in my life as a youngster. And so, over the years, I made a few mistakes in prison, but overall, I had a shift when I started positively programming, and I was able to educate myself and overcome dyslexia, and it's been a long journey.
When you think about the change in you, how you've changed, can you describe the change that's happened to you over the course of time?
Sure. Well, the main change that I've noticed for myself is this, like, education and getting my morals and principles in accordance with God's law. I was a godless person a long time ago, so it took me a long time to discover who I was and discover who God was and to come into accordance with God's law and His commandments and statutes. And so, over the years, when I think I developed who I was, and I've changed.
You've changed in what way?
Well, I've changed my way of thinking, who I used to be, the young man that I came in here as. That person is long gone, and I have goals now. I've learned so much since I've been in here, and now I'm just looking forward to the future. A lot of the mistakes that I made as a young man, I've corrected them, and I'm just trying to be as positive as I can be.
Can you describe or talk through or share your involvement in this offense?
Well, my involvement in this offense is I set up a drug deal, and what happened, it should never have happened. And I take full responsibility for all of this, because it should not have happened. If it wasn't for my involvement in drugs, then none of this would ever happen.
Where was the drug deal set up?
Usually drug deals for me was set up through pagers, or either I had customers, friends that I dealt drugs to and for, and usually we would just link up or whatever. Someone would page me and I would call them back on the telephone, and wherever we wanted to link up or meet.
Because what I'm understanding is that you indicated in your letter that you were not present when the murders themselves took place.
Absolutely.
Were you at the house at all?
Yes, sir.
When were you there?
I had been there several times. That house, we all partied there. We did shot shootings and with shotguns and shooting clays and etc. And we just partied. We listened to music out there. We did drugs out there. We drank alcohol out there. And so the time when the crime happened, I wasn't honest with the police. I didn't give them everything I didn't give them any information. I tried to cover up what I knew from the police.
So how did you find out about the murders?
Third party. When I was able to get out of there, and I went to South Minneapolis, and I was called by a friend at the time, Joel White, and he called and told me he needed to see me. And so when he called me, he asked me where was I at, and I told him that I was in South Minneapolis, and he came to South Minneapolis, and then that's when I learned about everything that happened.
So the drug deal took place at the house in Watertown. Is that what I'm understanding? And then you left?
Yes, sir.
And one of the things that you noted was that you are exercising all your due process options relative to the innocence claim, right? Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I don't have any additional questions. Any other board members have questions for Mr. Riley? Otherwise, we'll turn to his mom.
I have a question I'd like to ask directly, and that is, do you have an opinion about who was most responsible for the murders?
Is that for me or my mom?
That's for you.
I feel that I am. I feel that.
And tell me your role and responsibility.
Well, my role and responsibility is if I hadn't never linked these two parties together, then none of this would have ever happened.
And by two parties, you mean the victims and
Yes, ma'am.
who else?
And my friends at the time, I had a few friends that was out there.
Who do you believe committed the murders?
Well, all I know, ma'am, is from hearsay, third party. That's all I know is third party.
Thank you.
When the authorities arrested you, were you hiding under a bed?
No. I ran to the attic and to hide because they started shooting tear gas in the house, and so the owner of the house, they all said we was gonna go up to the attic. And so when I turned around, it was just me and my buddy JoJo, and he ends up going out there too. He can't end up going outside too, and I was stuck in the attic. They was shooting so much tear gas in the house.
You said that there were a few changes that have occurred during your 30 years in prison. One is you said you discovered God. One is your ways of thinking changed. And one is you overcame dyslexia. Is that correct? Those were the changes that you've experienced?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a common thread among those three, how you overcame those or how you achieved those goals?
Well, I think the common thread was just consistency. I learned consistency, and I got serious. I wanted to make serious changes about myself, because it's not fun being in a room or being in an educational setting and you're not knowing anything. You're not being able to pick up on anything, and you feel like, well, I felt people was talking over my head because I didn't know anything. And so I took initiative to do something about it. And I was able to do something about it when I was in Oak Park Heights. The teacher, her name was Miss Elaine Santor, and she took a great deal in interest in me, and she helped me every day. She helped me by just studying just a little bit of work. And so for years and years, I was in Oak Park the first time for 3 years, and those 3 years, I was in the educational program, and I did good.
Thank you.
In one of your filings, you stated that a third party had confessed to the murders. Do you recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
And who is that third party?
Well, the third party, it was Joel White. He signed an affidavit stating what he knew everything about the case. And that's on the court record and the Supreme Court filed, I think, and so the Supreme Court filed A 18-1809.
So this Joel White, are you saying he confessed to the murders?
No, he didn't confess to the murders. He just told me exactly what happened, and he signed an affidavit. And we filed that with the court, letting the courts know what happened. But the court said that it was, at this point, it was hearsay. And then my 2 years, the 2 year, in Minnesota, you have 2 years to file an appeal. So if you don't file your appeal within 2 years, the 2 year time frame, then they say you're basically out of luck.
What was the motive for the murders?
There wasn't a motive for the murder. I never knew the motive. I never knew any motive. There was one never established. There was no rhyme, no reason, or anything for the killing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Riley, do you, first, I'd really like to commend you for, the work that you've done specifically as it relates to your education and some of the things that you've overcome. So kudos to you on that. I would imagine that's something that's really difficult, but I think also highlights the ability for people to overcome things that can be extremely challenging. So again, I just want to acknowledge the work that you've done on that. The question I had was, and I guess I'm largely just looking for clarification. Do you still have an unmet treatment objective? If I remember right, I think you had started treatment and then something happened. And is that accurate?
Yes, sir, it was. I was down to my last 2 weeks, and an unfortunate situation occurred, and I let the system play out, and I was never able to get back in. And I've tried.
Is that okay? Is that something you're still interested in pursuing and getting taken care of?
Absolutely. Anything that I could do, you know what I mean? Any mandate that the board ever recommended, I always took care of the mandate.
Okay. All right. I appreciate the clarification.
Welcome.
Let's turn to your mom, Ms. Riley. Thank you again so much for being here today and supporting Adrian. I just want to open the floor to you to provide any input or comment to the board.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I would like to thank the board for allowing Adrian to have this appeal and allowing me the knowledge to speak on my son's behalf. Please be patient with me. My nervous and my anxiety, this is my first time doing something like this, but I would like to read what I wrote for the board to hear, if you don't mind.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I stand here before you today, not just as a mother, but as an advocate for my son, who endured and 30 years behind bars for a crime he did not commit. The only thing my son is guilty of being loyalty to his friend, believing in his friends. And the only thing my son is guilty of is not cooperating with the law enforcement. I believe in my son, and I'm failing to disclose information that he thought would be to protect them. And he has always choose to uphold a sentencing for being loyalty, which misguided and should not be defined in his entire life. During his time in prison, my son had worked entirely to transform himself. He has earned his GED, pursued college courses, and even passed a test for being a paralegal. He has also taken upon himself to help others by tutoring his fellow inmates, guiding them through their own legal challenge. This is a testament to his character and he deserved to make a positive impact, even in a different environment. The victims in this situation were his friends. My sons bear no ill will towards them. It is incomprehension to suggest that he would want to harm them in any kind of way. He feels deeply remorse and sympathy for the pain that he has results from these events. I also feel remorse and sympathy and sorrow for Troy, James, and Teresa. If given a chance, he would take it all back, faithfully moment in a heartbeat. I urge you to consider the toll that these years had taken on both of us. I am not only his mother, but his sole support system. And I have faced significant health challenge, including a brain surgery, a 9-hour brain surgery, and an ongoing memory loss. My health is deteriorating, and I feel that I may not have much time left to share with him. The burden of our separation has weighed heavy on my heart, and the pain of missing my only child is a daily struggle. Not only is my son has done this time, this 30 years, I have also did this time alone with him. Additionally, since my son developed a stage 2 diabetes during his incarceration, highlight the urgent need for him to receive proper medical care and support outside the prison wall. And I'm here to say that I am his mother. I know Adrian better than anybody and anyone. And if my son said he's not guilty, I believe in my son. That's one thing that me and my son always had, this bond between each other. No matter what you do, I'm still your mom. Whether it's wrong or right, I'm still your mother. And I would help you. Don't tell me no lie. We never lied to each other because we was both raised by my grandparents. And my grandparents always taught us, no matter how hard or bad a situation looked, always tell the truth. And so I'm here today to tell you that my son is innocent about what he is being accused of. So please have it in your heart, consider letting my son come home to me. Whatever, I know some of you probably having different thoughts, different opinion, thinking that he's guilty, but he's not. So please, as a God's will and God's child, please think about and let my baby come home, because that's all I have. We don't have no immediately family. We have a small family. All of them is gone. and it's just only me and my son left. And so please have it in your heart and have God in your heart and in your mind to believe and trust in him. Someone that is guilty is not gonna foul with the court and stand by their innocence. From day one, he have said that he are innocent. So please consider. Thank you for giving me this moment and this opportunity to speak on my son's behalf.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. It means a lot, and it's great to hear your sentiments and your thoughts relative to this. Mr. Riley, before the board begins discussion and deliberation about next steps, I want to again briefly open the floor to you to provide any final comments you would like to the board.
I would just like the board to know that I'm deeply, deeply remorseful for what happened to Troy Thokis, James Walter, and Teresa Woods. I want their families to know that I'm very, very sorry for what happened. And I want them to know that none of this should have ever happened. And I want the communities in Carver County to know as well that I'm sorry for my involvement in drugs and bringing drugs in their community and causing the deaths of the 3 victims in this case, because it would not have happened if it wasn't been for me, my poor decision making. So I want them to know that, and I also want the board to know that I've changed, and so that's about it. My record, my prison record, and everything that I've done, it speaks for itself. From my involvement in working in the community, but everything I've done in here, it speaks for itself. And so that's what I want the board to know that.
Thank you so much. And with that, I will close discussion, and during the board discussion and deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would just open the floor to discussion relative to Mr. Riley. I guess just what I may do here is just go ahead and offer a motion. I would move that we would grant parole effective today on his first life sentence, and that the directives would be that Mr. Riley complete the treatment requirement, engage with behavioral health, discuss issues relative to emotional regulation, and just what discussions about what does accountability mean, and any and all other pro-social programs that would kind of advance his status as we go forward. And I would not make a recommendation that would not include a transfer to a lower custody. But the case managers of warden, the facility can work in terms of looking at where needs or interests of Mr. Riley can be best met to affect transfers going forward. So that would be the motion that I would propose. Is there along with remaining discipline-free, obviously. Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Motion and a second. Or discussion?
I concur with the motion.
So just hearing that, I guess what we can do is, and we can add other items here, but are there other conditions that things that we would like to see him do that should be added to the list?
Two things that the program review panel specified were the restorative justice programming and the lifer group. So I would request respectfully that those be added.
Yeah, and I would support that absolutely.
I would just potentially add, whether it's an expectation or certainly encouragement, continue to, kind of follow up on the education piece. I think that is just really just such a great accomplishment and something to be very proud of. So I would really encourage continuation of that.
Yeah. All right. All right. We have a motion and a second. And I believe this would be for granting parole effective today on the first life sentence and moving him to the second. To the motion, Board Member Earhart.
I agree.
Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Ramstad.
Agree.
And Schnell votes yes. The motion passes unanimously, 4 votes aye. Mr. Riley, you are granted parole on your first life sentence. I know that that may come as a little consolation to you, but I want to I think acknowledge the work that you have done and the progress that you have made. This is really in keeping with what authority the board really has at this stage of the game. We do not have the ability to aggregate, as you describe it, or collapse sentences in your case. And so that we would just, encourage you to do continued work and seek whatever remedies are available to you to address the issues around the innocence claims. Any questions about that?
No, I think I understand.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I wish you the best. Good luck to you. Thank you, Miss Riley.
Thank you.
All right.
You want to bring Mr. McKenzie in now? Thank you.
We'll be switching out here to move to the next hearing, which is Wendy McKenzie.
Hello, Mr. McKenzie.
Oh, hello. How you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Good afternoon. We're new.
No, because we're a half hour.
Okay.
And also,
I'm sorry, you're cutting off.
Mike, it's a white disc on the table. Can you move that closer in front of Mr. McKenzie, please?
Yes.
That's what I can hear.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Buddy?
We have to see the mic's muted, so
Yep. Now he should be able to hear you now. I unmuted.
Okay. Can you hear us at the facility?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We're just waiting on your support person advocate to jump online here. As soon as he does, we'll begin. Mr. McNeil, I believe, is who we're waiting on. So as soon as he can jump on, we'll be ready to go.
All right. Is everybody watching? my supporters at DOC, or is it live stream right now?
I'm not sure what's set up on the public site. They have a separate one, Mr. McKenzie.
I would say that I'm sitting here, instead of having it way up, but still talking directly at it.
Thank you.
It was getting on that team. Had an office and a work stuff.
Is Aubrey gonna be on there too? Steckelberg. So who is she?
She's a employee that's down at the central office.
She's a who? Okay. The woman on my right, she's from RJ, isn't she? She's not.
I don't know.
Oh.
When we get going, we'll do introduction.
Gotta get a cup of water.
So for those watching, we're just waiting on Mr. McKenzie's support person who is supposed to be on here any minute. As soon as that he's online, we'll begin.
Excuse me, Commissioner. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it okay if I
Yeah.
get a cup of water?
Yeah, it's fine. You have a minute. We're just waiting on Mr. McNeil to get on.
Thank you.
Mr. McKenzie, have you talked to Mr. McNeil recently?
Yeah, he sent me a JPEG, said he would be here. I think
Okay.
I told them it was going to be 12:30, so everybody probably thinks. I don't think they anticipated, me being here earlier.
Running early. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had talked with him this morning, and he was planning to be on by 12:15. So we're just waiting for him to arrive here. And I've been trying to reach him on his cell phone as well.
Hello, Mr. McNeil. Can you hear us? Looks like you popped up. There. Mr. McNeil, can you hear us all right? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. All right, well, good afternoon, Mr. McKenzie and everyone. I am Andrew Carlson. I am the Assistant Director of the Hearings and Release Unit, and we're here today to review Mr. Amwadi McKenzie. Mr. McKenzie, you are present and participating via video from the correctional facility at Moose Lake. Mr. McKenzie's advocate, Mr. Justin McNeil, is also present and participating by video. Welcome and thank you for your participation today, Mr. McNeil. Here with me at the DOC Central Office in St. Paul is our Commissioner and Chair of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell, along with members Cheryl Ramstead and member Joe Earhart. Member Andrew Larson is participating by video. Our records indicate that on September 25th, 1992, in the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, Amwadi McKenzie, Shannon Bowles, A.C. Ford, and a known juvenile entered the Pizza Shack, shot Minneapolis police officer Jerry Hoff multiple times in the back, resulting in the death of Officer Hoff. On October 23rd, 1993, Mr. McKenzie was found guilty of first-degree murder in Hennepin County District Court. In accordance with Minnesota Criminal Code, Mr. McKenzie was sentenced to serve a 30-year minimum life sentence. Mr. McKenzie has served a total of approximately 32 years of incarceration and became eligible for parole on this life sentence on November 23rd, 2022. Mr. McKenzie has a 15-month sentence to serve consecutive to this current life sentence. Today's review is Mr. McKenzie's third review. The prior reviews were conducted by the Commissioner in an advisory panel. The main difference in this setting is that there's 4 voting members that are going to make a decision compared to the prior where it was just reliant on the Commissioner. I turn this matter over to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Mr. McKenzie, good afternoon. How are you today?
Nervous. Just a lot of mixed emotions.
Okay. Well, I'd like to just start by asking you to tell the board what it is you'd like to see happen as a result of today's meeting.
Thanks. Thank you, Commissioner. First, I want to acknowledge and take responsibility that, I caused the death of Officer Jerry Hoff. I harmed Margaret Hatch and harmed Gerald Dabrowski as well. I also want to acknowledge that Officer Hoff was more than just a law enforcement officer. He was a father, he was a husband, he was a grandfather, he was a friend, a co-worker, and he was loved. And I'm sorry for taking that from his family. I'd also, if the family's watching or if they're aware of what's going on right now, that I've written an apology letter to the family, and it's sitting at the Department of Corrections Restorative Justice Unit. I think they merged with the Victim Services, if I'm not mistaken. And that letter is available to them. I also want to acknowledge that, the harm that I caused the law enforcement community, the horror and the grief and the fear that I caused them and their families. I'm sorry for that as well. And I've written a personal apology letter outside of the restorative justice apology letter bank. I sent it to the Attorney General's office in 2019, just expressing my remorse and regret, for my actions. Also, I'm aware that this hearing is online and it's being live streamed. I don't know if that's the language to use, but, I haven't been aware of technology for the last 32 years. But I know that the larger community was also harmed as well. And anybody that's watching, I would like to, say I'm sorry to them for causing that same fear and that horror and that grief in the community and their families too. It's my hope that, in the process of this hearing that, everybody hears the growth, that I've done over the past 32 years, in particular, the growth that I've grown since the last hearing in 2022, I believe it was. And that they recognize that I'm not the same person I was 32 years ago. 32 years ago, I was a kid. I didn't have any direction, any goals. I didn't have any a positive value system. And that's not to say that it was my family's fault. It was to say that I turned my back on those values that I was taught at home. Right. I got involved in gangs, because I felt, maybe that was, some attention that I wanted at that time. And it kind of reminds me of something my friend Coley Gates told me. He said, sometimes, people accept the love they think they deserve. And that was a love I didn't deserve. Looking back on that, now I know I didn't deserve that love. And at the same time, that love, it harmed people, right? It harmed the law enforcement community. It harmed the Hoff family, the Dabrowski family, the Hopps family. I mean, it just harmed the whole community as a whole, period. And so since my incarceration, that's when I started making those changes. Obviously from, you all have access to the reports and, what I've been doing since I've been incarcerated. And we know there were some setbacks. In fact, there was a lot of setbacks. Because at that time I wasn't ready to change. And I didn't really have any examples of what change was. So coming from a dysfunctional, antisocial group inside of a prison, that same element is still there. So I had to sift through that. And I just mentioned Coley Gates. He was one of the people that he changed because he had the same setbacks. He went through the same growing pains that I went through. And I saw him change. I saw Jerome Nunn change. I saw a lot of those guys that I've been incarcerated change for the better. And that gave me permission to change. That was my model. That was my example. So I followed those examples. And as a result of that, from 2019, not that I changed it to, I changed before 2019, but what I'm saying is I transitioned at 2019 from a close custody facility to a medium. And I've been that same person constantly, consistently, every single day that I wake up, from Lionel Lakes to Moose Lake, right? So one of the things that I did adopt when I changed was I'm real big in community today. Since I harmed the community, I understand the importance of community. So I build community. That's one of the things that I do. And what I mean by that is I forge pro-social relationships. I maintain those relationships, and any relationships that were shattered or just that made them seem irreparable, I repaired those relationships. I said my apologies to whomever I've harmed, right, in my past. And also in living in community, I mentor others. I was recently in the Prison Fellowship Academy. And then there, I graduated. I got into the graduate class. I became the chairman of the leadership development group. And then I had mentees. So I mentored these guys every week. And that's one of the things of how I build community. And I facilitate classes now. I facilitated classes within the Prison Fellowship Academy, but since my transfer to Moose Lake, I facilitate the new Thank You for a Change class. I think it's 2.0 version. So that's one of the things I do in building community is now I have the ability to take that curriculum, utilize it, and teach maybe 12 guys at a time, right? And help them get back on track. So, so they can relearn those social skills that many of us haven't used. So we can learn how to think, right? So we can go through that cognitive process of stopping and thinking before we act. Because many times, a lot of us, even at our ages, a lot of people, I experienced in those groups, they don't really understand the ripple effects of their actions and how, even something as little as what you can say can harm a person, right? So I'm glad that I'm building community in that way. And another way that I build community was through the All Square Law Firm. I was an intricate part of setting up the legal classes for people to obtain law degrees from prison. That right there, that changes community. So when those people transition into the community, they're making the community better. Another way another value I've picked up was pro-social values. I'm kind of nervous, pardon me. But another pro-social value I picked up was integrity, restoration, and community. Community is a big value of mine, but restoration is another value that I live out. And I experienced that from my last hearing and prior to that, but I had an opportunity to really exercise that when I was at the academy, because it allowed me to contact people like Tina Segal from her restorative justice organization, and try to stay in contact with her and still, kind of practice that and try to understand what it means to repair the harm. And me and the commissioner had a conversation a while back. I'm not going to discuss the details of it, but, restoration entails, empathy and how that works and what you do in those situations and put my shoes in other people's, put myself in other people's shoes, and particularly the people that I harm. Right. Because it's when you, at the outset of me coming to prison, I really didn't fully comprehend the damage that I caused. Right. Once I comprehended that damage and I understood that, and I began to empathize with that family and the victims in the community, I realized that what I did was unconscionable, and it's just the ripple effects is I can't even quantify. I believe I said that in some of the paperwork I gave you guys, that in my mind I can't quantify it. I harmed people, so it was terrible. It was devastating other people's lives, right? So integrity is another one of my values. and doing the right thing at all times. And that's once I started making that transition from the old me to the new me to the man I am now. I've done that constantly and consistently, and I think whatever information you have before you shows that. And I'm not just talking about just the college educations and the therapeutic groups and the cognitive restructuring groups. I'm talking about those personal changes, right? Just having insight, the behavioral changes, having an anti-violence approach, learning how to think, learning how to solve problems without violence, learning how to diffuse a situation or de-escalate a situation. Because the way I live my life is what I teach in those classes. Even though the curriculum is a little scripted, sometimes I get to go off script and I get to have those conversations with those guys. I learn to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is one of the things that allow me to really open up, not only express myself and my feelings and how I feel, but also allow me to feel what other people feel. In particular, again, it always goes back to the people I harm. What I did to everybody was unconscionable. I devastated people's lives. And I'm sorry for that. Now I regret just that whole part of my lifestyle. And I'm not a part of that lifestyle anymore. I've changed for the better. I have a pro-social support network. It's from everybody just people in the community. That I reach out to every day, that I call every day, that I send JPay letters to every day. And they're probably sitting at I don't know what space they're in, but if they can see me or not, but my support system's here. One of the things that we learned from victim services while they were here was that we should, tell our support system to stand up. So I would appreciate if they can hear me, that they stand up so you guys can see that I do have people that support me. I do have people that know how I've changed, and they support me because I have changed. Right? Excuse me. That I've changed for the better, that I'm useful to the community. I'm an asset to the community. Right? I have everybody from lawyers to law professors to clergymen to my family members. They support me wholeheartedly. In conclusion, I appreciate this opportunity to be heard, and I thank you for that. And again, I'm sorry for just harming other people, man. And now I really realize not at this moment, but over the last 30 years, I've come to realize that I did something that I can't take back, and I wish I could take it back. Thank you.
Thank you for that. One of the things I appreciate, you talk about the notion of integrity and the work you've done, and I want to just acknowledge really a lot of the things that you've been involved in and your success with education and so forth. So I just want to be really clear about that. One of the questions I have is just, if you can describe or talk about what happened in this offense. One of the things that is oftentimes important is, while I hear the acknowledgement of responsibility for involvement in the offense, I think sometimes, that the importance of truth telling becomes really a part of the restorative process. So can you describe what happened and what your involvement was in the offense itself?
Yeah, I will, but I'm not going to be detailed because I don't want to reharm anybody, right? Any of the victims' family that are watching, I don't want to hurt them anymore. But for purpose of what you said, I'll just start at when I arrived at Sharif Willis's house, right? I arrived at Sharif Willis's house with my co-defendant. I'm not going to mention his name because you guys mentioned Juvenile, so I'll say Juvenile. So we went in the house. The house is maybe less than 1,000 square feet. So, the lights were on, TV are on, music is on. I was there. My Terry Willis was there. AC Ford was there. Shannon Bowles was there. Sharif Willis's son was there. Sharif Willis's other nephew was there. His nephew's girlfriend was there. And I believe AC Ford's girlfriend was there. And so while we're just sitting there, Monterey Willis pulls a chair up to the side of me, and it's really like the living room and the dining room, pretty much the same room. And he asked me to escort Shannon Bowles up to the Pizza Shack so he could take care of some business. I said fine. So we got there. I mean, we walked. We didn't walk. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna kind of skip the details with respect to just getting in the cars driving there. There was no conversation there. I was with the juvenile when I drove. So as we got out, I escorted him to the restaurant. The door was open when we got there, and he walked in. I walked in behind him. There were some shots fired. He ran past me. I ran behind him. The restaurant is small. It was dimly lit, so you couldn't really see. And as we ran out the restaurant, he ran in front of me. I ran behind him, and I turned around and I fired some shots at the restaurant. I don't know if they went in or if they hit the windows or what, but we fired some shots, and I helped him. Pretty much, we got away. I facilitated because I knew that I grew up in that area. That was a community I grew up in. So I facilitated us getting away with a crime, and then after the crime. I didn't find out till the next day that it was an officer that was murdered. And then again, I was helping hide evidence and lying and scheming and trying to evade the police and not again, like you said, truth telling. I wasn't telling the truth. So the integrity that I used at that time was the negative part of integrity. The integrity that I use now is the pro-social aspect of integrity. If I could go back now, the person I am now today, I would have never participated in that. I would never participated in that. I would have never tried to seek out friendship from people like that. I would have never tried to accept the love I thought they were giving me. I hope that was clear.
When you realized what had happened, and even in the intervening time through the trial, what was your kind of attitude or orientation or thought process?
Shock. It was shock. Period. I mean, I was a kid at the time, so I didn't have the cognitive process that I do now to think through things and properly analyze that situation. So I was shocked. I mean, I sat in the county jail. I think I didn't talk to my lawyers for like 3 or 4 months because I didn't know what to do, who to trust. I just didn't know. So I just kind of just went through that process numb. Obviously, there was some issues in the county jail that I was in, but as a kid, you just don't know how to deal with that type of situation. You got your family that they're crushed. You've hurt a whole community of people. You've hurt the law enforcement community. So it was so much going on, and I'm not talking about just that one time. I'm talking about every single day. It was a lot going on, and it was hard to process. I couldn't process it. I didn't have the cognitive ability to process that. It's like you put a child in a room with a bunch of colorful toys. Which one do you choose? What toy do you play with? What toy don't you play with? Right. So I can only describe it like that. But one thing I can tell you that I didn't have was the courage to stand up and say, hey, I did that, and apologize to people. Right. I didn't have the courage to do that. Now I do have that courage. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And when you say that, like, you didn't have the courage, what did that look like to people around you or people who were maybe watching the trial or to people?
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm just wondering. You described kind of that sense of you didn't have the capacity at the time to really process this and make sense of this. What did that look like? How did you come across at that time? Whether it was in the court process or to others, how did you come across? What did it look like that you couldn't process that?
I don't know. I would say on the outside looking in, it would just be like this young kid sitting here in the chair with his head down. Because my lawyer was always like, "Put your head down when we go into court. Don't say anything." Right. So that's what I did. I just followed his directions. So I don't know if it would look like, and again, that would be individualized. It's a lot of people. I mean, obviously the family was devastated. So they looked at me like, "Hey, you harmed us." I could see that clearly, regardless of what my disposition would have been or what capacity I had. That was there. But as far as onlookers or family members, my family was devastated. They believed in my innocence because I didn't tell them the truth. But as far as onlookers, I mean, the what they saw, it could vary. I can't really speak to what other people saw, but I think if at this point, if I could step outside my body and look at myself at that moment, man, just a kid that just did something unconscionable, man, that he hurt somebody. He's just sitting there not saying anything with his head down. Like he's not trying to be responsible for what he did.
You talked about some of the changes that you've had, around empathy and gaining a better, deeper insight into empathy. What was key, do you think, to gaining a deeper level of insight around empathy for you? What was it? How did you come to a place of having greater insight?
I would say you, sir. You were that key.
Well, I wouldn't go that far because we had a little conversation. But what did you do?
And that was the pivotal moment right there. I mean, I thought I had empathy because I read about it, I heard about it. I've been into a lot of the restorative justice convocations in Stillwater and Oak Park and those places, and I heard a lot of those guys on the restorative justice panel, tell me what it was, and I had the experience for myself. So when I went to the second restorative justice class at your suggestion, it was a little deeper because I paid more attention. When you start talking about things like, the web of relationships, right? And it was not the cognitive aspect that I understand it, and it was like you said, hey, it's about the feeling. How do you feel when you hurt people? And it hurts. It's painful. Right. And I know, I don't know if I'm describing that right to you, but I can, I've talked to a couple therapists since that time. I talked to one here and I talked to one in Lino, and it's really about me positioning myself with respect to feeling that other person's pain and really truly, trying to grasp that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. When you think about, when you imagine what your actions took from people, what do you imagine the people who are most impacted, Officer Hoff's family and primarily, what do you imagine that pain to be like as you describe it? And
family member. I mean, just thinking about that is hard, and it clearly it's painful. But I couldn't detail that pain or that hurt. It's painful. That's the only word I can really sum it up with. It's definitely painful to get that call, and yeah.
I appreciate that. You said. You made a comment in your letter that just stuck out to me. I would just want to ask you about. And I think it really spoke to the kind of whole notion of at some level, perhaps, the issue of, what do you, and deserve is not the right word, but you made the comment, I'm not entitled to anything, and I don't expect anything to happen. But I've done the work on myself, and then you went on. How do you square that when you say, like, I don't deserve, I'm not entitled to anything, and I don't expect anything to happen. And then obviously there is this pull, I would imagine, that you want to move on. So how do you balance that whole notion of, what you may or may not be entitled to, and the expectation of, what should happen as a result of today's hearing? So how do you square all that, balance all of that?
It's hard because on one hand, I understand what I did, and I don't expect anybody to be forgiving or anybody to say, hey, that you're a changed person. I don't expect that from anybody, and I'm not entitled to that, right? Because I don't want to come in here with the expectation of entitlement that, okay, since I've done all these things, okay, move me forward. No, that's not my position. That's not my place. That's not what I'm doing. So it's a hard balance, sir. I mean, I do the best I can every day. I try to be the best version of myself every day that I wake up, and in hopes that doing that those changes that I did made would allow people to say, okay, we're going to give you the privilege to prove that this is who you are, and then move me forward or transition me. That's pretty much that's what I'm kind of thinking in my mind, because I don't want to come in here and say, okay, I did the time. Matter of fact, I did this and I did this, and give you this checklist of stuff I did and say, okay, now you owe me and I'm entitled to this. That's not my position at all. My position is to come in here and accept responsibility for what I did, apologize for what I did, and then allow you to kind of sit back and say, hey, okay, I recognize that. I also recognize the changes that you've made, and you feel that maybe I could transition, and give me that privilege to transition and continue to show that, when the rubber meets the road, that I am the person that you see, the change that I made.
I think I understand. I mean, what you're saying, because I think this is the push and the pull, at least, and I'll just speak for myself. This is the push and the pull here because I want to acknowledge the fact that you have done a lot of work and those sorts of things. And then, one of the realities is of this process is the whole notion of victim sentiment. And it's not, I'm not talking just about the Law family. I'm talking about there's a broader community context here that weighs into this. And I have, there's letters of opposition, and there's tremendous letters of support. And I think that's some of the balancing that you're probably describing as well. And I think it speaks to this whole notion that two things can be true at the same time. That change can happen, and yet there is a process around, that the whole notion of atonement or restoration or recognition of community harm and what somebody may be entitled to as a result of that. So thank you for that. I would open it up first to other board members who may have questions for Mr. McKenzie. Or then we'll go to Mr. McNeil.
Mr. McKenzie, as you described your role in the murder of Officer Half, it sounds like the original plan was for you to accompany this Mr. Bowles. And were you going directly to this Pizza Hut? Was the intent to kill an officer?
I wasn't aware of that. My co-defendant asked me to escort him to the restaurant, and I did. I will say that I know it was going to be some harm done, but I didn't know to who. I didn't find that information out till the next day. I went to my mom's house and she was reading the newspaper, and that's when I found out. And again, I still, I was an active participant, and I was still helping people get away, still lying, just being involved in all that chaos and disorder.
And you were carrying a gun when you went in, escorting Mr. Bowles. What was the purpose of you carrying the gun?
I had a gun with me all night. Because, if I go back and start from when we got back then it was pagers. So, when we got the page and somebody told us, hey, Sharif Willis wants us over at the it was a high school. I forget the name of it right now. We grabbed guns and went up there because there was no details about where we were going and what it was. We just knew it was an emergency. So, we grabbed guns and we went to this high school. Then when we got there, that's when I found out it was more of like a community meeting with I think it was the police chief and like city council members or something like that. So that's when I just sat down because I didn't really understand what was going on at the time. So I was pretty much just blindly following orders. And,
would it be accurate to say that you knew someone was going to be killed when you went in with Mr. Bowles to Pizza Hut?
Yes. If not killed, somebody was going to be harmed. Yes.
And Mr. Bowles had a gun, you had a gun. It was just the two of you?
Yes.
Who went in?
Yes.
And you described it as Mr. Bowles shooting and then running, and then you shooting as you ran behind him.
Yes.
Did you not see that the person being shot was in uniform?
No, I didn't go that deep into the restaurant. I kind of like stopped maybe 5 paces in the door, and then he walked deeper into the restaurant, and that's when I heard the shots, and he ran past me, and I just ran behind him.
And what was the purpose of you shooting?
To defend myself, or not necessarily defend myself, to stop people from stopping me.
Was anyone chasing you?
Not that I know of. And in my mind, that's, when I heard the shots, that's all I knew was to react, to stop anybody from whatever was going on deeper inside the restaurant, was to stop them from catching me.
And changing course a little bit, I'd like to know, which of your accomplishments do you think best shows your remorse or helps make amends to Officer Half's family for their tragic loss?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say it was a particular, like a tangible accomplishment, like a certificate. I would say it's just the changes that I made, the behavioral changes, the attitudinal changes, right? I had a negative attitude before I came to prison, and part of why I was in prison. My perspective has changed, my worldview has expanded, and just adopting, a lot of those different values that I've acquired over time, right? I spoke to a few of them, and just those things like that, just being a different person, just being a human being, right? Just respecting people, just respecting authority, right? Respecting rules and people's boundaries. Those are the things that
spoke of gaining empathy, and I'd like to know, in terms of empathy, Can you describe how that feels, your empathy for the family of your victim? How does it feel for you?
Feels like tears. It feels like I could cry. That's how painful it is.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the family if you were able to do that today?
Yeah. I definitely like to let them know that they didn't deserve what happened to them. Their loved one didn't deserve what happened to him. I'm terribly sorry for what happened. And anything that I could, again, the only way that I could actually, tangibly repair the harm was through the apology letters. But anything outside of that, whatever I could do to continue to repair the harm, I'll do it.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Other questions from board members?
Yeah, I did have a question. So I understand you have been trained as a facilitator in Thinking for a Change. So I too was formerly a facilitator for that program. I'm assuming that probably thinking reports are probably still a part of that program in some way, shape, or form. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So Thinking for a Change is really modeled after, thoughts, feelings, attitudes, beliefs controlling our actions. So what would a thinking report look like from the night of the offense?
Wow. It would be terrible. It would definitely be terrible. So in writing that thinking report, oh man, I wish I had the outline. Oh my goodness. Well, I would describe the situation. Just objectively describe the situation, and then I would walk through each of the things that each thought I probably had, if I'm not mistaken. Excuse me, I'm trying to imagine these reports in my head right now.
And that's really what I'm at. Like, what were those things?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm less concerned about the format being exactly right, and more curious. What were your thoughts? What were your feelings? What were your attitudes and what? That's really more what I'm asking for.
Okay, thank you. Really, my attitudes and beliefs and my feelings were just to impress my friends. Period. These are older guys. I'm a kid. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever they want me to do, I'll do it. So it wasn't a deep thought process of the outcome of what would have happened. I definitely didn't think that. Yeah, so it was just more so just, whatever my friends were feeling, I was feeling. Whatever they wanted me to do, I did. Whatever they wanted me to do to get along, or whatever I had to do to get along with them, I did. Whatever I had to do to impress them, I did. To keep that friendship, or right now I would call it a malignant friendship, right? So that's the process that I went through as a kid. As I acted like a kid, I thought like one, right? I'm not going to say in a position, or I'll just, like the commissioner said, I didn't have the capacity to really think through that process. All I knew was to go along to get along, right? Because I didn't want to wake up the next day and then have my friends say, "Hey, you sold us out." If that makes sense.
Can I just build a little bit on that? I just and I've said this to you before, that you are, I think, a very articulate person. You can speak well, you describe things well, and you have obvious and apparent cognitive skills in terms of your thinking. When's the last time you experienced emotion that people around you could really visibly see?
When my mother passed away, when my brother's daughter passed away. Actually, she was killed by a hit and run driver. My brother was harmed; he was hurt. It's really just been expressing a lot of that with family. I mean, but outside of just being outside of the intense emotions, I mean, people have seen me elated. You know, when I've accomplished good things.
Graduation, for instance.
Yeah, graduation, things of that nature. When I was in the academy, you know, I was a community clerk, so I hosted a lot of events. So those events, they allowed me to express those emotions. I can remember one time doing I didn't host the event, but I was participating in a Christmas event with the members of Celebrate Recovery. And, you know, I had to speak in front of the crowd, and I cried because I had to, you know, when they said, you know, the question, I believe it was posed like, what does Christmas mean to you? Right. And I expressed to them that Christmas at this point meant to me that that I was worthy of standing up talking to them, because, you know, before my mother passed away, she told me she was proud of me. Right. So that was a real that was real huge, because all these years I thought it was like she was just disappointed, right? But, you know, when she told me that she was proud of me, that was impactful.
Mr. McKenzie, would you describe, please, your history of involvement with gangs, and was this a gang-related gathering prior to Officer Half's death?
First, my history with gangs was, you know, when I was 15, it wasn't really serious. Just guys hanging out. Then once Sharif Willis got out of prison, that's when the gang structure really got put together, and a lot more, you know, organizational aspects from you know, him in, you know, within a group of particular guys. It wasn't us young; we were kids. You know what I mean? So we kind of looked up to him, and, you know, we thought he was you know, the next thing next to sliced bread, right? Obviously, that was the wrong thought to have. But as a kid, you don't really process it like that. So it was a lot of meetings, a lot of mandatory things that we had to do. Like every Friday, you had to be at what they call a goal or rotation. Mandatory. If you didn't have a job, if it was an emergency, if you didn't have to take care of your kids or something like that, that was mandatory. You know, so if you didn't go there, then you were fined. You know, they had a list of fines and things of that nature. If you didn't go there and you didn't pay that fine, then you had a violation, meaning you were physically beat up for a certain amount of minutes, whether it was 1 minute or 60 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever it may have been, right? So that was the atmosphere that he had created. And so that was the bubble that I lived in at that time. So that required a lot of, I don't want to use the word discipline, but a lot of you know, just malignant loyalty, right? If that makes sense. You know, that's what I did as a kid. That's how I lived. You know, so I mean, that's just the gist of some of that. But as far as what was the second part of your question?
Was the death of Officer Half related to the gang initiation, the gang activity? I'm also interested because earlier, in answer to some questions, you referred to being influenced by your friends. Did you consider gang members to be friends
at that time? Yeah, when you're a teenager, you know, I considered them friends at that time. Now I wouldn't consider them. I would consider them friends at all. You know, because there was nothing pro-social about. Say that again.
When and how did you make that separation or separate from your gang identity?
once I was incarcerated. Prior to that, there was no separation. You know, that's where we were. I don't even think we considered ourselves a gang. We kind of, you know, was always equated to, I guess, a cult, if that's what you want to call it. You know, we did things unquestionably. You know, if you didn't do those things, then there were consequences behind that. So you were forced to be disciplined. You were forced to be loyal to this particular body of people, right? You know, so as far as it being a gang, I guess gang involved killing, I mean, you could say that if gang members get together and go, you know, wrongly take somebody's life, I would say that would be a gang killing, whether the entire gang was involved or not. But a group of that gang went and did that, so that was considered, in my mind right now, I would consider that is part of a gang killing, which I'm no longer a part of. And I haven't been a part of a gang in, man, 25 years, you know, for decades. That gang mentality was gone many years ago. Now I'm an autonomous person, man. I'm a single human being.
I'm going to shift gears for a moment. I note that in your financial plan, you indicated you had approximately $14,000 in personal savings account and that you make approximately $500 a year from book publishing. Where did those funds come from?
The book for royalties from book. Sometimes the book publishing I might make $100 a year. As far as the other money, I think it might be less than, it might be 10 now, maybe 8, but it's just friends and family, jobs, working in the prison. You know, I worked interstate for a while. When I was in Stillwater, I believe it was. I think I had 2 interstate jobs there. You know, so I took the initiative to save some money. When people send me money, I would save it. And a lot of that money that they would send me, I would use to publish the independently published books, because I don't publish with a traditional publisher.
Thank you.
I have just one more question here, and we'll turn to Mr. McNeil. But, you know, this is a fairly substantial change compared to the parole process we had in the past, right? I mean, it was much more contained and controlled. Does it seem different to be recognizing that you're speaking to a much broader audience, and what that's like? What is that like for you?
Yeah, I was asked that like 2 days ago. I was talking to my case manager. He always asks me how I feel anytime we talk about the parole process, and I told him it's like just overwhelming. It's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, a lot of just mixed emotions. It just like it feels like it's more tension, right? Because it's like if I were, I mean, you and I had so many different conversations prior to my first hearing, and then after my first hearing, you know, up to this point. I haven't seen you because I'm in Moose Lake, so we don't see you that much. But when I was in the other facilities, I would see you all the time. And the last hearing was a little different because, you know, I used to see Curtis Shanklin all the time. I used to see Michelle Smith all the time. You know, I would see them in passing and high and by. So it was not necessarily personalized, but you know, you get a feeling of who I am generally, my attitude. You know, you recognize that I smile all the time. You're probably the only person in the room that could say I have a gap between my teeth, right? If somebody asks you to describe me, you know, that's, you know, I'm always smiling a lot when I see you, you know, and the conversations we had, and they weren't just high and by conversations. Those were, again, the conversation we had about empathy. Those types of conversations can kind of give you a better idea of who I am. But now it's a little different because everybody gets to view me on paper, right? So it's like, okay, we read this stuff about you. First, it's like, okay, it's probably a lot of mixed emotions. It's probably a lot of just a lot of question marks. And obviously that's where a lot of the questions come from. And so it's like I'm not really, people don't know who I am because they haven't interacted with me personally, right? And I think even just this visiting through, I guess, a Zoom, it's somewhat impersonal, so if we were all in the same room, then, there's a certain type of energy that could go back and forth between us with respect to asking questions. And you can kind of feel my essence and, who I am and understand my sincerity and see my sincerity and feel my sincerity and my authenticity, right? So I think those are for me, those are the differences between, meeting with you in the other hearings and then the meeting now.
That's helpful. So there's one of the things that happens, and one of the things you're describing is there's a process, right? That you go through when when we've had these conversations about some of these issues and some of the history and the change of the various different programs you've been involved in. There's a process that occurs there. And one of the things I think that's happening now with the open, with the hearings being open is, and you recognize this, that this is the first time for many, many people to hear you speak in your own voice about, what this is about and the change that you have undergone and the work that you've done and continue to do. And so that is an important part of the process. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I always say I'm going to ask one more question, the last question, and I ask another one. But if you were to say, I just made this notion of like the work that you've done and the work that remains to be done. What is the work that you need to continue to do and that needs to be, as you think about the future, whatever that is?
The first thing
what's that work? What's
first?
The work?
The first thing on my agenda is to finish the CTEC class that I'm currently in. That's something I'm passionate about. I've been trying to do that since like literally Stillwater. When I read about it, I would always get information about it. Then I missed the opportunity at Lionel Lakes, and now I'm here, and I was given the opportunity by Kaylor Distelhoff to get me into that class. So that's something I'm really passionate about that I want to complete. Another thing that I want to do moving forward, if I'm given the opportunity and the privilege to do that, is to work with the legal revolution and continue to help incarcerated men and women get legal education. Because from my perspective, my legal education came from just learning it from scratch, right? I didn't have a formal education. I learned it from scratch. So I learned how to apply it from, just my own will of volition. But empowering people that are incarcerated is something that you can't even put it in words. You can't describe it. But at the same time, empowering them so when they leave, that they don't come back and that they can use that legal knowledge to not only feed their families and feed themselves and make the community a safer place, but just to help just the broader community and not just one aspect of that legal knowledge, right? Because it's so vast. There's so many different areas you can go into with that and so many different people that you can help, right? And having that vocation, because it is a vocation, just think about all the things that are going on in North Minneapolis right now. I know that legal education can help change some of the lives in that community. That's without a doubt. I know that can, because I can recall doing, helping guys with their legal work. I've done that for over 20 years. And I could see me, when I helped them, and once they learned how to do legal research, once they understood those legal definitions, once they understood how to file stuff in court to help them or help their get what is that called in fraternity suits and all these different things that helped them, how proud they were that they could do that themselves, because I can't speak for you in court, but once they were able to do that, it was so empowering. It squared their shoulders and lifted their chins. And I know that has the power to do that for everybody that's in those classes right now. Another thing that I know that needs to be worked on is me, period. It's all about me always growing and developing, always enhancing those internal skills or those soft skills that I've learned, right? Being useful to people is something that I'm really, really into, because, serving is something I'm passionate about. I really enjoy helping people. I really enjoy helping people be autonomous, independent, and just watching them, seeing those changes in people.
Thank you.
I had just a follow-up question, Commissioner, if I could.
Yeah, please.
So Commissioner had asked you to kind of talk about what this process has been like for you. What do you suspect this process that is now open, what do you suppose this process is like for the victims and victims' families?
Again, it goes back to what I said about just hearing my voice and seeing me. It's painful. It's painful.
Okay. With that, thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. McNeil. Thank you so much, Justin, for being here today in support of Mr. McKenzie. And I want to turn the floor over to you to provide whatever comment and insights you'd like.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me here, and with your patience and getting here a couple minutes after it started. I just looked at my phone and had missed some calls, so I rushed on. I've been kind of excited for this hearing to happen because it has been, as you're aware, because you've seen me on several of these calls now, I've been doing a lot of work with guys serving life sentences, and I've worked with a couple dozen at this point, and I can tell right out the gate when I work with someone if some change was present, if they were actively working on themselves. And so things I look for is when we look at their release plan and I help them build it and make it more robust, that they're actually genuinely helping with it and working on it and have insight and are eager to make it better. I look at programming and things they've done. I also look at, do they have remorse, or are they still explaining away a crime decades later after it happened? And when I started working with Mr. McKenzie, I noticed that right away, that he was articulate, that his release plan was really robust and well written. And when I made suggestions, he didn't argue or push back. He was eager to add more things, and that also staying connected with me on a weekly or bi-weekly basis through JPay and just talking about struggles, things going well, things going good, preparing for this hearing. And I know he had a hearing a few years back, and now he's at 32 years, and he had some directives of doing restorative justice and moving to Moose Lake. And you've just heard through this hearing, he has very good insights on what happened and the ways he's thinking and how he can change. And then the one thing I like is he doesn't put expectations on anything. It's just about improving, making sure people know that he's remorseful for what happened, and taking any steps or directives that the department has that he needs to heal himself, to become better himself. And I think a lot of that shows, and you can't just say that everything shows through programming, because it takes more. It's their behavior while incarcerated and a lot of things, but just the programming, the ability to work on himself, also the time that's passed since some of his disciplines. He's demonstrating, in my opinion, because I'm not you guys, that he's ready for what is to come next. And if that is, whether that happens today or it happens further down the line, he's open to any adjustments that may happen along the way. And it's funny saying this just on the nature of why we're here today, but it's been a pleasure to work with him. It's been very easy. The conversation has come easy, and I haven't had to push much to get him to do the things that he needs to do for these hearings to happen and to have a robust release plan. Because I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls I've seen with some of the people I work, their unwillingness to add more, to look deeper into what they need, to building a social network, which he really has. He's working with a lot of other individuals besides me. And so that when it does come time to come to the community, the likelihood of having good progress and not as many bad things happening is much higher, especially when you have people you can lean on and run things by. And, he runs things by me all the time. And he's always thinking about how can I be better? How can I change? And so I was really glad to be his advocate and be able to make it today. And that's what I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. McKenzie, before the board begins discussion and deliberation about next steps, I just want to briefly open the floor to you to provide any final comment to the board.
Again, I want to reiterate, my remorse and regret for my actions, and I say I'm sorry to the Hall family, to the Gerald Lebrowski's family, to Margaret Hodges' family, to the law enforcement community, to the community at large. I want to definitely thank you all for this opportunity to be heard. I want to thank my supporters. I mean, if they could stand up for me again, that would be appreciated. I guess I can get the floor back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. With that, I'm going to close the discussion, and during board discussion and deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would open the floor to the board members to talk about next steps. Thoughts or ideas?
He has a consecutive 15-month sentence.
There is a consecutive 15-month sentence that would have to be served. So if he were paroled at some whatever point that would be, he would be on constructive parole status during the service of that. So he'd have roughly 10 months or so to do.
Well, he certainly has made some good changes for himself. The thing that concerns me most is the gravity of the crime. And I don't know what the rest of you think, but it seems like there was a little bit of minimization in terms of him turning and shooting back kind of aimlessly. And I know the report mentioned that some windows were shot out. So does he, and maybe he said this clearly, but does he acknowledge that he shot Officer Half in the back with his own gun? That was what I was trying to get at. I didn't hear that. Did anyone else? Am I missing something?
No,
I know he acknowledges guilt.
He acknowledges shooting and not knowing, whether or not his shots were a part of this, but
and
part
also
of the death.
not knowing that we are going in the pizza shack, we're going to kill an officer. He's not acknowledging that, but everything I read led me to believe that it was very clear to them that they were going there to retaliate against a policeman. So that part of it bothers me a lot, that the minimization, not that it happened or he's responsible, but his specific role. I didn't hear it.
I would concur, even to following the request that he give a ride, go to the pizza shack.
Didn't know really why.
Yeah, it just didn't make sense. And then he said, well, we do whatever the gang does. So, I mean, he didn't use the word gang, they were his friends, but, and I agree with you, turning around and shooting back.
Yeah. It's more like he was an escort and he was almost it was just a circumstantial sort of thing, but it was planned. It was clearly planned by everyone involved.
Yeah.
So that's the part that holds me back. I'd really like to see him acknowledge fully his deliberate planning and role and exactly what he did. And I'm not saying that he doesn't feel empathy. We don't know what people feel. He's learned a lot in prison. He's made a lot of changes. But that is an important part of it.
Yeah, with respect to the empathy, I think it was less visible. But then I noticed the program review team said his matter-of-fact tone and demeanor and description of the crime and events of the evening do not appear to mean that he does not show. They interpreted it to mean that it's not that he doesn't show remorse or accept responsibility for his actions. So they're acknowledging that he describes it in a matter-of-fact way, but they're saying it doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't show remorse.
Right. I think this was one of the conversations that I think he's referencing, that sometimes his description of his involvement or accountability or those sorts of things, oftentimes you don't see the affect or the emotion side of that, and because he's a very smart guy and quite heady.
And I know not everyone shows emotion.
Yep.
They may feel it deeply,
Right.
and that's something we can't tell. But I didn't hear culpability to the extent that everything else tells me is true. Didn't hear it. I'd like to give him a while longer to work specifically on that and to acknowledge it in writing. And I don't know what he's put in writing for the family, of course, but something that would describe his role specifically, right down to bullets fired and intent and thought and his role in the planning of this and what he thought they were going to do. They're not just going to go hang out.
Right. I think it is interesting, and I heard when I asked him that question, I think there was qualification, and part of that was really out of trying to maintain a level of respect for the families in terms of detail.
I heard that. I understand that.
Yeah, and yet at the same time, I agree. There is and I'm not speaking to this case specifically, but oftentimes there's a real need, interest, and desire by people to really know exactly what happened and what that sequence was like as graphically and fully as possible, because it helps them understand context better. It helps them understand what that loss was, what the intensity of the moment was, all of those things that I think oftentimes we hear from victims is painful, and as hard as that may be to hear, that they want to know what that was about. Mm-hmm. So I don't disagree.
I just don't know about timelines or what we could look at in terms of how I can accomplish that, or if there's some particular, or just straight up tell him that this is necessary to put this in writing and make it totally accurate and specific.
And I think that certainly would be something that could be requested as part of this. I also think that this whole notion of the process itself, the change in the process, and I think it's been interesting, and I think it will be as this develops further. But you think about all of the people that Mr. McKenzie acknowledged being harmed by this for the first time, really have the chance to hear what they hear and also like what they don't hear. Mm-hmm. But I think in the course of that, this is part of the openness of this process. I think is really also a part of the opportunity for healing, for further questions, for understanding on the part of others. And this is the first time. And it's not, lost on me that this week is actually, Police Memorial Week. And this is these cases have lasting, long-standing impact on what happens in police departments. It impacts people profoundly, and that whole notion of not wanting to forget this particular case, we know that Officer Hoff was very close to retirement. He was taking a break, had no direct involvement in anything, was not involved in a police action, was taking on his break reading the paper when the shooting happened. And I think, that recognition, that acknowledgement is important, and it's something that I'm certain people will want to hear and have an interest in hearing Mr. McKenzie speak to what his involvement was and what his thoughts are today as he looks through a different set of eyes at that behavior.
I just don't know.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I apologize. I didn't mean to interrupt. That was the one thing. He's done just a lot of really good things. It was the piece that was missing for me. There was what I would call almost some conflicting culpability, for lack of a better way of articulating it, that I think that really has meaning. Certainly it does for me as a board member, and I suspect for the victims as well. That is something that is really meaningful. Hearing the version, well, I'm just running out and shooting blindly backwards. I don't know I don't know. So that just feels a little hollow for me. I think there's more. Even, when I pose the question about the thinking report, I think there's room for a deeper dig into really kind of what was going on. And I think that would be helpful. And I mean, if he's sincere about really wanting to find out, what are the things that, certainly from a board perspective, but I think more broadly, even from a kind of a societal perspective, I think those are really important. And, I think it was a valid question that the severity of the crime, it's just a real thing. I think I certainly evaluating any law enforcement death with an even closer kind of review. I just do. With regard to what that length of time looks like, that I don't know. I know even within, I think, the PRT recommendations, one of them suggested, in terms of just potential options, continued placement in a medium facility, potentially in Faribault, I think, for some additional academic and vocational options. I think that makes sense. Again, I think it does boil down to the time frame.
And I wonder if there's some type of program that could specifically address this. I know restorative justice is much about accountability, but is there something we could direct him to specifically work with him on this? Or perhaps he could do this work alone. I mean, he's heard what our concerns are. Perhaps his case manager could find a program or work with him, if time permits, to get this in writing. And if he needs to meet with someone to help with that, or if we need to give him specifically, this is what we have questions about.
He is fortunate to have Mr. McNeil here, because my understanding is Mr. McNeil typically follows this individual after the hearing, and having heard our concerns, and I see thumbs up from Mr. McNeil, that would be a relationship that it seems to me would be a significant one to Mr. McKenzie, and could have the most meaning in terms of holding up the mirror and having that integrity and honesty we're looking for.
Would a year be reasonable on this?
Let me just, Mr. McKenzie, just a quick question. What's the status and length of the program you're involved in right now, the CTEC program?
Hold on, you're muted.
Muted. Hang on one second. Wait. We got you muted on, I guess. Is it on our side?
Chris, can you speak?
Can you hear
we
me?
go. Yeah, now we can hear you. Yep. Good. Thanks.
The program is 4 months long. I just started. I think I've been there maybe 3 weeks, but it usually extends maybe 5 months because of being laid in and things of that nature, holidays and stuff. So I would say maybe 5 months.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Here's what I would propose. I think just the timing wise, so we have 5 months. I think the year is going to be slight. Just my thing, and I think maybe even to look at if we looked at a move there to and maybe coordinate something like this with, options for further education. And one of the things that Faribault offers is some of that, including even right now, that's where some of the law school students are operating out of Faribault. So I would maybe propose a 2-year period of time continuance, and at this time, and if that's something that others would agree to, I mean, I can do that in the form of a motion, I guess. You kind of started that, but I could just form it as a motion that we would deny parole today, continue for a period of 24 months with the condition, and we would look at a move in there, and the facility team can work with HRU on that side of it when it would be appropriate. But really, I think this key thing is around being able to provide a full and complete accounting of individual responsibilities, actions, and what happened, and even
planning,
and the planning, and what and frankly, the context around the intensity of what that was like at the time, and in the immediate aftermath of that, I think those are the things that oftentimes I hear from victims, that they want to know what that was like, and then it's a choice on their part if they want to know, the details that have maybe even more painful to get at, but I think that's oftentimes part of the assessment for people who've been impacted. I'm also mindful of the fact that that of the community impact here, and I think Mr. McKenzie spoke to that community impact, and I'm not sure how that ever gets addressed. But I think one of the things that happens in an open process like this is that it does allow people who want to watch the opportunity to see what makes someone tick, and hear from them directly around the growth and the change and those sorts of things. So I think it's that detailed accounting. I really appreciate he talked about, I need to make sure I'm continuing to work on myself. It would be nice to hear a little bit more about what that looks like. And I think even things like, how would somebody around him know that he is either in a good place or a not so good place? And what does he empower people around him to do when there's a question about that? I think will be important. There's no doubt that Mr. McKenzie has done a lot of work, and we I feel this, I'm just speaking around that sense of the gravity of the offense, the context, the loss, real, as we in all of these loss of life cases. But the impact was obviously very pronounced here, and the circumstances. Again, this was not during the course of a law enforcement action. This was he was sniped for all intents and purposes, and I think that is a context that is important to the community and to have acknowledged. So, and then obviously remaining discipline free would be a part of that. And so that would be the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Any other thoughts, observations, suggestions in terms of what this looks like, or what it is that you think is going to be important for Mr. McKenzie to come back in at his next hearing and speak to with the hope of being moved forward? Are there other things that we would add? All right. Hearing none, there's a motion and a second to the motion. Board Member Earhart?
Agreed.
Board Member Larson?
Yes.
Board Member Ramstead?
Yes.
Schnell votes yes. Motion prevails. Mr. McKenzie, you've had a chance to kind of hear the board discussion, and I can well imagine that there's even though you came in not with the statement that you weren't entitled to or expect anything to happen. At the same time, I want you to hear that there is an acknowledgement of the work that you've done there, and I hope you can recognize the importance of this process to give the people who were impacted by your crime the opportunity to hear you and see the growth in you that I've had a chance to see in terms of the times I've seen you at the prisons and the times that you've come up for hearings, and we've had a chance to have these kinds of conversations back and forth. Others have not had that opportunity, both the community at large, the victim's family, and that's one of the real values of this process. So while you may feel a level of disappointment, I would also really encourage and strongly encourage you to continue to do the work, continue to serve the community there that you have done, and to engage in the work process that I think the board has asked you to complete, and would come back and see you at that point in time. We can talk between your case managers and HRU about possible moves in the course of this. Any questions about that?
No.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. With that, we wish you the best. Thank you, Mr. McNeil. Appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
All right. We will go to the next last hearing for today. This will be in person.
You're still live, guys. Thank you.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah. We have to set up good.
Hearings and Release Unit. We're here today to review Mr. Michael Buntrock, who is present here at Central Office, Minnesota DOC Central Office in St. Paul. Here also with myself is our Commissioner and Chairman of the Supervised Release Board, Mr. Paul Schnell. Member Cheryl Ramstead, Member Joe Earhart is also here present, and participating by video is Member Andrew Larson. Our records indicate that on May 4th, 1995, in the city of Minneapolis, Michael Buntrock strangled and killed his mother with a radio cord while she was sleeping. On August 9th, 1995, Mr. Buntrock was found guilty of first-degree murder in Ramsey County District Court. In accordance with Minnesota Criminal Code, Mr. Buntrock was sentenced to serve 30-year minimum life sentence. Mr. Buntrock has served a total of approximately 30 years in incarceration and became eligible for parole on this life sentence on May 4th, 2025. Today's review is Mr. Buntrock's third review of his life sentence, and this is the first by a supervised release board. So the major difference between today's review and prior is that there's a 4-member voting committee compared to prior when it was just the commissioner. So with that, I turn this matter over to the board. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Buntrock. Welcome to the meeting. I'd like to just really turn to you, open the floor to you, and ask you to just walk through with the board kind of what the last, maybe what in a kind of shortened, abbreviated manner, kind of what your history has been through incarceration, and then really give some more particular focus to the last whatever it's been, 13 months, last year or so. Just walk us through kind of what you've been through.
Thank you. I want to express gratitude first off. Over the past few years, I've felt super supported through the decisions you made for me in my life. Shifting to Faribault initially was like, man, that kind of stinks, but there's opportunity there. And everything I had learned in Triad from 2016 until 2022, those skills were put to use. It was great practice to hit the ground running for the next phases. The guys in that facility at the time, there was more opportunity for people to be up to mischief. It wasn't as supportive as a community as Lino Lakes was. Lino Lakes being a therapeutic community, there's holding people accountable, and you can approach them and say, hey, fella, just so you know, I don't want to see you get in trouble. Faribault, that's less receptive. It's more like mind your own business. And throughout that time, knowing that there was end in sight, at some point, we're getting closer, wanting to do everything to get to that point. So looking into jobs, looking into what this looks like, and doing the research and the legwork to figure out what a budget plan could look like, or how do I, what kind of pay scale do I need to get into to have this section of life, or, what does this look like? My support team is fantastic. Having the fellows around me that I've done a bunch of time with, they're like brothers. And the family on both sides, to some degree, what's left, I should say. Being able to talk with them and have communication with that side of the family, especially my mom's side of the family. And a few weeks ago, was able to spend some time with them, on one of my passes, sitting in their dining room, super welcoming. So 2016 was, September 2016, 23rd is my birthday. That was the first day I woke up in Lino Lakes, sober, clean. That's my clean date. Haven't used since, never plan to again. I'm very proud of that. Having been given the opportunity to heal the crap that was inside of me that caused that kid to make those decisions. Gratitude. There's a lot there. getting more emotional faster than I expected.
Yeah, you're okay.
You know, I'm really grateful for that team. Whether it's the therapists, the fellows who've gone before me, and being able to reap the benefits of that reward, you know, is inside. You know, there isn't the desire to use anymore. The first thought isn't my reaction, or that's not my response. You know, they talk about first thought wrong. Sometimes I got to get through half a dozen or more, you know, before we're starting to get to something that sounds a little better. Sometimes when I stop a little short, I end up getting myself in a little more trouble because I'm not communicating as effectively as I believe I am. So after 7 years in Lino Lakes, 2022, I got to meet with you, Commissioner, and was afforded the privilege of moving around to a different facility with the understanding in that time, we're giving you a timeline. Let's see what you got, you know, and seeing you in 2022. No, that was 2024, 2023. I think. Anyways, the last time I saw you, 28 and a half, sorry. If you remember correctly, one of the last things I put in my letter to you was everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yes.
And holy shit, has this last year been a punch in the face? Yeah. So, in the timely manner, after the hearing, I was shipped to Red Wing. 43 guys, I was one of the privileged to be there. It's not really a lifer facility, but being considered one of the 2 or 3 that are allowed there, honor. While there, I was able to work a few different jobs to be able to see into society a bit. You know, that first step outside, they say, all right, you got to go through the fence here, go over there and get your state issue clothes. And I was like, outside the fence? Like, without an escort? And they're like, yeah, where are you going to go? You know, you're here or you wouldn't be here doing that. And I was like, oh. And just that realization, and the staff at Red Wing, very supportive all the way through and through. You know, questions are answered, you know, conversations are had, expanding that network there too of support. There's a individual officer who is shifted from Red Wing now, he went with me for a couple of transportations, and seeing him and interacting with him in the facility. He's now a caseworker at a different institution for a friend of mine, and being able to hear from my friend, you know, the input of like, oh, you know that guy? Man, he was really doing good. And it's kind of a short straw that he drew. While I was in Faribault, prior to the hearing, some of my supporters were asking me, you know, like, you know, are you healthy? I'm like, I feel fine. You know, nothing feels wrong with me. You know, at the time it was like cookies and popcorn for dinner. So there's a concern that comes up with, well, what's your blood sugar? What's your cholesterol? Do you know those things? I'm like, no. Why would I? Who cares? Right? And strongly encouraged, go get it checked out. So I went to go get it checked out. And when I went into the doctor's office and they did the blood draw, they also said, well, we'd like to give you a stool sample for, you know, check for colon cancer. And I now do it at 45 years old instead of 50. So at the time I was 47. All right. Sounds good to me. Was it about September? I got the results back initially. And the guy's like, yeah, you know, they found some blood in your stool, but it's nothing to worry about. We strongly encourage you to get colonoscopy. I was like, all right, if it's nothing to worry about, I'll wait until later to do it. I was assuming at work release, you know, get all that medical stuff up to date and refreshed. Then after the hearing, it was into January. My caseworker told me that I was supposed to be leaving in a week or two, and I got called down to health services. Wasn't expecting it. And the doctor says, you know why you're here? And I was like, no. He says, well, it has to do with the cancer. And I was like, the what? I had no idea. You know, I said, man, you told me that months ago. I'd have started then, but didn't sound like it was a big deal. And he says, well, we should get you in for a colonoscopy right away. And I said, look, man, I'm moving forward any day now to minimum. Can it be put off for a little bit? And he's like, yeah, but I strongly encourage you to get this taken care of. And I says, I made the promise to him. I says, look, when I get there, I'll make sure that I get it taken care of. And I did. First thing he said during the orientation intake stuff, when you go to health services, they said, look, I was referred for a colonoscopy. If we can do that, I'd appreciate it. If I have to wait, I'll still get it checked out. So I believe it was May that they were able to get it scheduled, and went in and they found colon cancer, stage 3. And the doctor came in and told me, and I think I surprised him, because it was like, okay, now what? You know, I mean, I can't do anything about it. What do you want me to do? Kind of position of like, I accept it. Now what do I need to do to address this? What can I do to get better? What do I got to do? What's the next step? And I can understand where, you know, people that have dealt with that or have to deal with that, or know people that have dealt with the process of it, it ain't fun. You know, so I could see where individuals would feel really emotional about being told that sort of stuff. In my circumstances, it was still good. You know, like I was in a good place. I was supported. And as I said, with what the panel and projected for me, we're doing good things. So I was moved to Oak Park. They put a port in my chest so they could access and put the chemicals in and things like that, and started chemotherapy. I was focused on getting back to minimum as soon as possible. And that just doesn't happen overnight. So initially I was using, they do an infusion in the cancer center. You know, that's where you sit in the chair for a couple hours and the chemicals pump in. And then they send you home with like a fanny pack, and it's got another little chemical thing, and that's attached to the port. Well, I found out after a couple of rounds that that's what was keeping me in Oak Park, that there's some pills that you can take. You know, it's the same chemical, just in a different form. You have to take them another week longer. Instead of having the pump on for 2 days, you take 10 pills for 2 weeks. Okay, let's do that. Let's get back to minimum and get back on the bus moving home, you know. So we shifted. It was, I believe, beginning of September, we shifted from having that pump attached to the chemotherapy pills. Had one round while I was at Oak Park, just fine. The next round, after I got into Lionel Lakes, had a bad toxicity reaction. In 1 week, lost more than 30 pounds. I couldn't eat and keep anything down. It was bad. They ended up taking me to the emergency room. Said, you know what, you're having a reaction to some of the chemical here. We're going to call a timeout. They stopped chemotherapy at that time. Said, we're going to move right on to surgery. The chemicals, given time to get out of my system before doing the surgery. So the week of Thanksgiving, I went into Southdale for procedure. You know, I was sitting in the bunk waiting for them, you know, for the surgery prep area. And they come in, they said, are you red? And that's all I heard. You know, I was out after that. I guess they must have had the chemicals going for the, whatever it is, you know, the anesthesia stuff. Woke up a few hours later. You know, I didn't feel in pain. They're like, are you sure? You know, I mean, usually there's a lot of pain involved in this. And I was like, no, I'm okay. And they offered any kind of medication I wanted. You know, they said, we got Dilaudid, we've got oxycodone, we've got Oxycontin. And 10 years prior, I would have been in heaven. Pain level 15, you know. Where I'm at, I don't care if it's pain level 15. I'm going to be in more pain if I put that stuff in my system. I'm not okay with that. I told them absolutely not. You know, even down to the point of Tylenol. Like, they had to say, well, we need to give you something. You have to have some stuff to help the blood flowing around. So it was like a, I don't even think a codeine thing, just the regular Tylenol stuff. And I was like, all right, we'll do that. Recovery went real well. Like I said, going in, it was stage 3 cancer, which is not great. You know, it's one step away from, oh shit. And they did the biopsy after taking out a section of colon. And was cancer-free. They didn't find anything in there because I followed the regimen, did exactly what I was supposed to do with it. I was eating the right things in order to encourage slower growth and rehabilitation part. So the initial tumor itself was like 5.6, whatever measurement, centimeters that I think they used. And by the time they did the surgery, the pre-op colonoscopy or MRI, one of the pre-op, let's see how big it is things, it had gotten down to like 2.5 or 2.6. So it had effectively halved itself just in the few months that I had done the chemotherapy. And they're like, all right, let's do this. Recovery went well. Chemotherapy stuff sucks. I'm still dealing with the after effects of neuropathy in the hands and feet. My balance isn't as good anymore because the feet are off kind of bit, but it's all a work in progress. I thought I was in the clear. I was starting to feel better towards the end of January. The chemicals have now been out 3-4 months, and I'm like, yeah, this is great, And just before leaving from Lionel Lakes to be allowed to move forward, they said, we want to do a few more rounds and finish up the chemotherapy. And I had the option, because it's just an option at that time. It's a preventative measure, is what they said. We want to make sure that it doesn't come back anywhere else. You don't have to do this, but it'll increase your chances of preventing a relapse by 50 to 60%. If I was in a selfish mode, I wouldn't have done that stuff. It ain't fun. It's no good. Basically put me right back to where I was a few months ago, or prior. And I was like, but if everything I'm doing is to move forward and to live a life outside of prison and to be able to contribute something, I can't do that if I'm neglecting my own self. I got to take care of myself. Otherwise, I'm no good, period. So, yep, let's do it. This ain't great, but let's do it. I had 2 infusions after we started again, and each time there was an allergic reaction to the chemicals there that I didn't recognize them as allergic reactions, and they didn't tell me what to look for. They just said, tell us if you start having an allergic reaction or something. Well, I didn't realize that itchy palms, for example, is an allergic reaction to it. So like an hour and 15 minutes in, when the lady comes and asks, how are you doing? I says, all right, my hands are kind of itchy. She's like, oh, crap. That's an allergic reaction. I should have told you that. Oh, okay. I finished up the chemotherapy right now and talking with my oncology team. We aren't in the maintenance phase. We are in a monitoring phase. Matter of fact, on Tuesday, I have a colonoscopy scheduled just to check, see how things are healing up, make sure there's nothing new that's arose. This is May, so May 5th, I think it was, I had a CT scan. Nothing new. Everything looks good. Blood work is really good. Things are getting back to normal that way. Starting to feel better. I'm able to run with this group called Mile in My Shoe. They work with the people out of Salvation Army over there in Minneapolis. What a group. That's just an amazing group of people. The fellows that come out, they're all in treatment. So I get to kind of reflect back into my mentoring, and talk to them about, hey, keep up the good work. A guy celebrating 30 days clean, being able to give him a hug and say, congratulations. Keep it up, man. It is worth it. And I know your struggle. I've seen it. I've lived it. You can do it. I appreciate being able to contribute that stuff. And you had asked earlier about the peer recovery stuff. At this time, not able to participate as a peer recovery specialist just due to restrictions of the halfway house currently, but it is something that I will pursue. That's definitely on my radar. I know I have some feelers out, a couple people in the community that I talked to about it. Being able to go to an NA meeting, I go to 2. They're both in one night at the same building. There's a Crystal Meth Anonymous, and then there's an NA meeting right after it. And it was so welcoming there. That's my home meetings. I love going, being able to go there and see the people and get to know them and encourage them and feel that same encouragement back.
Aside from the health stuff, what has been the biggest challenge and realization as you progressed really through minimum and out in work release?
One of the bigger challenges, I mean, even just most recently, I was hired on this last week at Frito-Lay out in Coon Rapids. I'll be working on the dock. It initially was going to be a picker, picking orders and putting them on a cart, giving them to the dock workers to put on the truck. During my onboarding on Tuesday, one of the managers came in and asked, he says, like, you know how to drive forklift? And I was like, yeah. I says, I know gas or electric. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the stand-ups, but I mean, it's a similar concept. And he's like, we can teach you all that. He says, you're going to be my guy. I'm going to work with you. So instead of having 3 days a week, I'm now working 4. So I think that's going to be pretty awesome. 10-hour shifts from 8:30 in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, making decent money, be able to start establishing. To get to your question with that is computer stuff. The real big challenge is like I had to file HR paperwork in order to figure out how to navigate through setting up, your direct deposit pay accounts, just the different check boxes, not familiar with that. I don't want to click the wrong thing and accidentally fire myself from the company. I don't think it works that way, but at the same time, I'd hate to delete my employee ID number or something. So, reaching out and talking to my support team, and today I even called the HR guy and he was able to help me get through the step-by-step, the directions that they send you in, the PDF thing. I tried following it step by step, but the tabs that they're pointing me to, they're not on the screen. So I think they updated their stuff since Google Chrome versus just Google Drive. So they didn't update that part yet. So that's where I was getting confused. But that's been a bit of a challenge. Acclimating into society as far as like going to stores and things like that or just interacting with people. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's familiar. I've been in a store before. It's a little different, but at the same time, being able to navigate through some of those things. And every now and then I found myself like I have to stop and be like, all right, we're okay here. Let's go, on to the next thing or, keep moving forward. In talking with my mental health therapist, I recognize that, while I'm riding on the bus, for example, I always take the first front seats that are turned sideways, more so because then I don't have somebody sitting behind me. Them buses and public transportation, while it's a great way to get around, there's a lot of sketchy stuff you see, and I'm not willing, maybe that's not the right word. I don't want to put myself in a predicament, become an easy target for someone else to make a bad decision. More so because it affects my life, run in with an officer or something. I don't know what the outcome could be, but chances are, I've got to call the house right away and say, hey, there was an assault that happened or this happened or, I was involved in this and that could potentially send me back to prison. No, thank you. So just making sure I'm aware and learning communication styles outside of prison, the way people talk. I'm really working to clean up my language. Not doing so great. You'll notice there's a few cusses slipped in here and I apologize. It's still a work in progress.
Who is your support team?
My support team, Tony Holtorf is one of the tops of the list to me. He's been my mentor all the way through prison. He was at my last hearing with us and, just almost every step of the way. So when getting my driver's license, he was one of the primary people that helped with that. So one of the hurdles that I had in getting out of prison is my birth certificate name didn't match my social security card name. It was Michael William Stephen Buntrock. My social security card, which was issued in 1978, said Michael W. Buntrock because they typed him and they just typed the W instead of the full thing. Now, knowing what I know now and talking to the person at the Social Security office to get it straightened out, he said all you had to do is just write us and we would have issued a new card because they had on file the full name that was on the birth certificate. in talking to the Social Security office number that I had gotten from my caseworker, they're like, yeah, you have to, go through this for name change and do all these things. So I had done all those things, and I went in there and showed them, like the doctor's note, the birth certificate, the state ID, that you get out with the DOC ID. And he's like, oh, yeah, there's no problems here. That's how you're listed in our files. And I was like, all right. There's a bit of like, damn it, this could have been done sooner. Mm-hmm. But it happened in the time that it's supposed to happen. I was able to get my permit right away. And through taking the permit test, I had talked to the lady at the counter after I passed the test, and she's like, yep, I passed the test, congratulations. I was like, all right, do I get a piece of paper or something? Because I remember 16 years old, you get the little paper carbon copy. And she's like, nope, you're all good, you can go. And I was like, all right. So I left. I didn't realize that you're supposed to go to the other line, because the person that I asked said I'm good and I can go, So I went all the way back to the house, and I was back at the house, and I'm like, something doesn't add up right here. And I looked at the piece of paper that she gave me as a receipt, because I asked her, I said, I need something to show to my case manager that I passed the test. So she printed out, you passed the test. And I saw that it still had my old address on there from where I lived as a kid. And I called the DMV right away, and they're like, we don't have anything on file. Did you register? And I was like, like all the wind just went right out of the sails of like, dang it. So I ended up having to go back a couple of days later, straightened out super easy. But at the same time, it's just one of those things of I need to communicate the thoughts or the concerns I have, because while I look 48, my experience is that of an 18-year-old in society. So when I'm interacting with people that don't understand or aren't familiar with or have no idea who I am, I look like somebody who's been in the community, knows how to use a smartphone, or has a smartphone. That was one of the things I had to tell to my employers this week is like, my phone doesn't have the capabilities to scan a QR code. I'm not allowed that option at this time, and they're like, oh, no problem. We'll help you here. So they're really supportive of that.
So just who else are some of the other people on your support?
So we have Tony Holtorf, Ross Shepard, Michael Olson, Danny Schubert. My stepmom Diane is fantastic. She's really big part of my life. I have a Mika's friend, Terry Steyerwalt. Tomorrow we're going out to Fort Snelling to plant flags. One of the things I had said before, I was really looking forward to honor the veterans and those that have passed. My cousin from my mom's side of the family and her mom and dad, those are the people I was talking about being able to talk with a couple of weeks ago. And they're like, we're here for you. The conversation, they understood the circumstances. And growing up in the house, it was an abusive household. And there aren't excuses to be made. There are contributing factors to the decisions that I made. And it was observed by others that it wasn't a healthy house at the time. And knowing that there's space for them to air whatever thoughts they are, I wanted to take accountability to them as best I could, and thinking in like the restorative justice mindset of how can I repair the harm that I've caused to you? I've taken someone that you've loved and cared about away from you. I can't put it back. How can are there questions I need to answer? What is it? What can I do to help? And they've been really great about it, just welcoming, inviting. Like I said, they welcomed me into their house. We had Jimmy John's, and my aunt made me, there's a fantastic sweet potato pie, some cookies and stuff, and little dog-shaped cookies, because she knows that I was raising dogs at Leader Dog in Lino for a while. And, it was very welcoming.
What work do you have to do? What's on the agenda? What does Michael Buntrock need to do to continue on this path of doing well and living the best life you can, in part, as a mechanism of paying back for the harm you caused?
Very good question. There's a lot of goals and objectives that I have. I talk with my agent, she says, work on the foundations, work on the foundations. I'm the laborer who's going to work on the foundation and keep an eye on what the blueprints look like so I can plan, where does the deck go? I'm not building the roof, but I'm thinking about what kind of shingles we're going to put up there. How much is that going to cost? How are we going to get that done? That forward thinking. So the things I have in mind and being supportive in my recovery community, staying active in the meetings, go into my mental health appointments to make sure that if there is something that's getting a little squirrely, I'm able to talk about it with someone that I can trust and just leave there or get some feedback. That redirection that was I'm so grateful for from Triad is having the therapist say, challenging the thoughts. That's a real big piece there. And for me, being transparent, sometimes it comes across a bit harsh or aggressive or assertive or, more bluntly put, whether it's talking with Tony, for example, or others of, well, here's what I'm fucking thinking. Yeah, I got to work on the softer mittens on some of those things. But right now, the support team is, they're gifting me a car to make sure that I'm able to make it to my job. So I'm able to save up the money and contribute that way. Right now, funds are tight. That's just kind of how it is. And I didn't come out with thousands and thousands of dollars in my pocket. And I'm living on a budget, and I appreciate being able to live on that budget because there's a lot of stuff I want to do, and I recognize that I can't or I shouldn't. I mean, I absolutely can do it. But is it financially responsible? That's going to put me in a pickle. I can't. And knowing that funds are tight, and to get to Frito-Lay, it's an hour and a half bus, it's an hour bus ride and a half hour, 40-minute walk to get there. I'm more than willing to truck that on foot if I got to. And to make sure that I'm not late or I'm able to maintain the job and do what I'm supposed to be doing, because getting through all of the different challenges, there isn't a quit. It's how are we going to get there? The fellas see that and they support that. I know they know, and I know that someday it's going to be me paying it back to the next fella, whether it's somebody getting out of prison in a similar position, or whether it's another lifer or one of the people in the meetings. Being able to have that support to pay forward, to put myself in a position where I've established my foundation, I've built the house, and now I can welcome people into that house. I have a good line on an apartment at some point when there's approval and it's financially responsible to get. The manager is going to let me know anytime one comes open. He's like, I'll let you know. You just let me know if you're ready for it. I'm not jumping in on that unless I can afford it. I'm not going to bury myself in debt like that. That doesn't help me anyway in the long run.
What do you want from what action would you like from the board?
Well, as I'm grateful to be here, especially sitting in person. I've talked about it with multiple people of like, what would I like to see happen here today, kind of question thoughts. And really, worst case scenario, I get sent back to prison. But that's not really very realistic. I haven't done things that would specifically warrant that. It's an option, less likely. Next worst case scenario in my mind is congratulations, you're getting out in 2 weeks. Oh crap. I don't know that I'm ready for that. As we discussed at the last hearing, you asked for 8 months. That would be sometime towards the end of September, beginning of October. To me, that's the best case scenario. 5-6 months out from now, have the date prepared. So then there's more of a specific end in mind. Hopefully something before Christmas. I would love to be able to have the opportunity to talk with my agent from the street. So instead of having the 30-mile radius, I can go further places. Tony H. lives in Austin, Minnesota. I'd love to be able to go down and visit him. I can't because it's 30 miles. Ross Shepard currently lives up in the Duluth area. I can't go visit him because it's outside of there. So it's me asking them to come see me or come down to the cities or come up to the cities and spend some time with me. And they're more than willing. And it makes it difficult, friendships and things like that are reciprocal. It's not just one-sided. So being able to return the favor and go visit them when they're struggling, one of them is his father's going through some trouble right now with cancer himself. I'd love to be there to support him. I can do it on the phone, but I can't give him that hug, Ultimately, whatever the terms are, I'm more than grateful. Just for the opportunity to see the world, to be part of it and contribute what I have inside and share that. I'm optimistic that it'll prevent somebody else from having to sit in this seat someday.
Others have questions for Mr. Pontrac?
It says something about you needing to make sure you have all major medical problems taken care of before you take the next step. And it sounds like you have.
Yes, ma'am.
You'll have follow-ups, I'm sure, but that's taken care of. But you want to remain in the bridge program for a few more months?
No, so today is actually my last day of working in the bridge.
Oh, okay.
I
I misunderstood my own notes.
That's okay. At the time that the notes were submitted, there was still more time to be finished at the bridge before I was completed.
Okay.
Today would have been my official last day. So one of the goals I had was usually at 30 days ahead of time. Most guys are allowed to start preparing the resume and applying for jobs, or they're able to download their resume.
And so that's why you were able to go ahead and
go
to work.
I spoke with one of the people there about it, and I says, look, I'm a little slow on typing. My fingers aren't as good as they used to be. I got to hunt and peck now instead of actually keyboard type. In order to transfer my resume into the computer to download it and stuff like that, I was given some extra time ahead of time and able to apply for some jobs. Bimbo Bakeries was one that I applied for, that maintenance tech position. They weren't hiring at the time. So they said, sorry, we went a different direction. Frito-Lay was the second one that I put in. I put in multiple others through Indeed, and I contacted a few other companies. I had 2 or 3 different interviews lined up once I was even hired to Frito-Lay, and I had to call them and just say, hey, I'm sorry, I've been hired at another company. I appreciate the opportunity you were going to give me, you were willing to give me. Currently, there's a company, K9SF. It's a few blocks away from the halfway house where I'm living. It's a dog training and doggy daycare kind of thing. It's a part-time gig. They had it posted at, you can have 8-hour shifts or 4-hour shifts. And I was like, that'd be great. Pay is $16 to $16.50 an hour. I mean, you're not making a home run there, but the hard work that gets to go into it, raising and training puppies, that's something in my heart. One of my long-term goals is to start a puppy training business, so I've got some feedback on that. And that's one of the things that I'm starting to look into now that the medical stuff is taken care of and the driver's license stuff is taken care of, and I can kind of focus on more goal.
So you're saying you want to stay in the halfway house until September or something like that? Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Even though you have a long, long distance to get to your workplace.
Correct. I think for circumstances, that would be best case scenario, due to being able to save the money. So one of the things I've gathered along the way is you want to have 3 to 6 months of in savings of your paycheck. You want to have that kind of put away in case something happens and now you're laid off for a couple of months or something happened, you know.
What would you do if you moved out of the halfway house in 2 weeks? What would you do?
This is why I like preparing for things. The current position would be I would go to my stepmom's. She has space available where I can rent the room. I'll have a vehicle. She lives in Shakopee. It'll be a bit longer of a drive. Well, worth it in the end for the job. Being able to have that taken care of. I would see it as a short-term stay. While staying there, I'd be able to pay smaller amount of rent to a family member, you know, for the room. Say roughly $500-600, whatever it is a month, instead of, you know, $1,000 to extra. Until I'm able to save enough money to get to the point where, all right, now I have some on the side to where rent is taken care of, car payment, or insurance, I mean, or, you know, the stuff that goes along with driving a car, and the other responsibilities are taken care of.
Well, in considering leaving the halfway house, I know that there are times when the halfway house says we need the space and we only have people remain here for X amount of time, whether that's 4 months or whatever it has to be. And I don't know what halfway house are you in?
I'm in Portland House, 11th Street or 11th Avenue, Southeast Minneapolis. There.
And so I don't know how they operate or if they encourage people to leave at the earliest opportunity. Sounds like it's working well for you. And, you know, of course, your adjustment is the main thing. I don't know about the halfway house. Does anyone?
How long have you been in work release now?
90 days.
90 days. So it's 3 months. So we talked about initially planning on 8 to 12 is kind of what we would look at. And so your kind of suggestion was to stay there, look at fall, which would be roughly that 8-month mark. And then look at it. I mean, I guess I would rather not. I would rather have you get stable with this work stuff and get some, you know, reserve some money built up and some of that kind of stuff, as opposed to just having you go out with this change. That's just me. Would be kind of important as we look at this transition.
Fully agree. It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
And I would like to just be able to, I think, be able to be in a place where we could do a quick check-in with you, and then we could look at, you know, a date, because you would in that meantime you'd get to a place where you would know what you can afford, you know, where you're going to live exactly. We do agent assignment that could be 60 or so days, and so at least we would see you. You know that it's tough when we're adding stuff to the calendar in the short term. Yeah, maybe it would just be a quick one though. It's really more of a file review than anything, just to see how you're doing. But for you to be here, just for us to be able to check in, we can look at something this fall to I think to try and do that would be my suggestion.
That's consistent with what the agent's recommending
Yeah.
too, that there be an actual check-in to see what his release plan, how it's developed, because there's some holes in that right now.
Yeah. And I think just now that you're starting this work and that kind of stuff, I think would just be a good thing to do. We'll see what we can. What do you put?
We have 5 hearings for all of the September, November, and 6 December. So, I mean, if it will just be the short file review, I mean, we can do any of those. September 9th, September 24th, October 14th, and November 12th are the.
Let's look at September, the late September one, just to do a file review and, just to check in, just to see what that release plan is and that kind of stuff. And then so that we know that would get you right around the holidays. If you got a date, would get you, that agent assignment and you'd know where you're going and all that kind of stuff. So that's the hook here, is to continue to do good and to really, I think, tighten that release plan as much as possible, especially on this budget stuff, because things are tight. And then, even knowing things like what your health coverage is and all of those things, because I think for me, that's about the stability side, because having my own medical issues and cancer stuff in the past, I understand that, but making sure that you have a clear sense of what you need to do in order to deal with anything that may come up is just important.
Can I ask a question? Yeah. The agent said that your overall adjustment is positive, and it sure sounds like it from what you've described, but commented that you need to slow down because you're easily overwhelmed. What is that referring to? Are there situations that you can think of where you were easily overwhelmed? And if so, how did you cope with them, deal with them, and what would you need to develop between now and September or October to be able to handle those effectively?
So that's a great question. And I've gotten some feedback on that currently as we're going through it. In some of the communications with individuals, my thoughts kind of ramble around a bit. So I don't know that I'm getting the point across directly in the manner that I believe I am. I believe I'm giving it very well stated, and the way it comes across isn't how I intend. So working on that communication and rounding out and softening some of those words, or processing through something that I acknowledge. And I've noticed it was brought to my attention going through therapy, is when I get conflicting information, my brain goes into like, okay, now what? But the look on my face doesn't say, I'm welcoming to your feedback. It makes it look like I'm very upset and angry and pissed off, for lack of better words. My brain has just shifted into, okay, that's a no. How can we work to this to get to that? Starting to the next step process of things. And I strive to make that clear in some of the conversations of like, look, I'm not upset. It's conflicting with what I thought was supposed to happen or what I was thinking was happening. So the look that comes out may be more aggressive. I'm not angry. I'm fine, and it's not a F it, I'm fine. It's I accept it. Okay, now what? Similar to what I was saying with the cancer diagnosis and talking with the doctor, where it's like, okay, that sucks. What can we do now? And being able to make sure that the message I'm trying to relay is received in the manner it was intended versus left to question. Because if it's left to question, then it goes through a different filter. And it may be a different experience filter. It may be, the angry face filter. It's like, well, your body language says you're really mad right now. So the way I hear it is that you're really mad. And I acknowledge that I must do better in that, to make sure that what I'm saying comes across in that manner.
So when you're overwhelmed, somebody would recognize that from your facial expression that you'd look angry. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I don't know that it's as much overwhelmed, but I can see where overwhelmed would tie into it. I've been encouraged to slow down a lot. I feel like there's a lot to do, and there's plenty of time to do it in. And when there's a task put to me, all right, let's get to it. It's something that was instilled as a kid. We got to clean this. All right, let's do that. Or we have to do yard work. Okay, let's get after it. So when there's when it comes through like that, I can see where it would look differently. But
does your health condition give you a sense of urgency that you need to do something sooner because it may not be a later?
No, actually, I feel very comfortable and confident with the treatment that I received, and as I mentioned before, from the support from the panel. Initially when I was leaving Oak Park, I was told I was going to Lino Lakes for 2 months, and when I got to Lino Lakes, it was, well, maybe it's going to be 4. Turned out to be closer to 6. Okay, well, how that turned out might not have been how I wanted, and it turned out for the best.
Okay.
Because by the time I left, I'd had the procedure done. I was through with chemotherapy for the most part. I had to go back through for some, but I recognize that my timeline or my will is not always the important one, and it's something I picked up with recovery. I have to be open to those things. So the idea of being overwhelmed, there's a lot on the plate. I don't have to eat it all at once, and I'm diligently going to go after it.
I think that's it's a great question. And I, just as you were describing this, and and having heard from so many guys who come out and want to get on with it, and yet there can be risk in that. Just know that for me, when you come back, this slowing it down stuff is going to be important. And if you struggle on that front, not a punishment. My goal will be to slow you down. And I've done this to other people who said, like, hey, look, we're gonna run you a little bit longer here, another 4 months or something, because it was that important. Because I think what can happen, the last thing I want to have happen is you get your date, you're out there, and that happens, and that frustration can come out in a whole variety of different ways. And you have good stuff. It sounds like you're well seated on the recovery side and those sorts of things. But if things come out crossways at work and those sorts of things, and part of this is just about slowing down. And yet I understand the urgency of wanting to live life after after being incarcerated for as long as you were. So, and I'm sure you heard from some of the lifers too, that where they're saying just, hey, as much as you want to get on with it, you have to slow down.
Well, for me, there's not really like an end goal in sight as far as that goes. Like living each day is going to be part of it. I'm also living for tomorrow. I'm not just living for today and damn what happens tomorrow. That's part of it. I am planning for tomorrow. And part of that for me is asking questions. Some of it may be too far ahead. I look at the objective. So we've talked before a little bit about a 10-year plan down the road after prison. What does that look like? I'd like to own some property, have a place, be able to raise dogs, train dogs, whatever it looks like, aquaponics system, and it's there. I'm not to that phase yet, but I see that at the end goal. And as all plans change, the way that I get to that goal, I have to be flexible. And as I see it moving forward, it's like, okay, this isn't working. Now where do we go from here? Okay. And I'm not saying it as far as being wishy-washy or like oh, I don't like this, I'm out of here. But how can I make this accommodation fit into the part of this plan? And how can I fit the plan into this role? So now working more in Coon Rapids, the idea of moving to Shakopee is a bit further away. Sure. If I was at Pepsi, which is their parent company, and I believe we'd be able to transfer to PepsiCo, Burnsville's a lot closer.
Right.
So if that was the case and I went to live with my stepmom, I would inquire about that. Having that forward thinking part of what does it look like? What do I need to do this? I've asked questions of like, can I get a vehicle? And it's, 45 days into work release. And it's the slow down. Of course, you can't have the vehicle yet. Usually that's at 90. Okay, well, what do I need to do to get there? Kind of thinking process. Or, the apartment. When can I do that?
So just know that, the really being tight on this plan and then tight with the plan, and yet the ability to have some contingencies and to deal with things that can do it, I think will become important. Yeah. Others have questions for Mr. Bunrock?
Just one quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
What do you do during your leisure time?
So this mile in my shoes thing, starting to get back into running around, exercising. That's one of the things I like to help with mental health also, just to kind of ground myself and like, we're good. In the house, whether it's talking to support team, investigating the stuff that I'm allowed to on the computer, looking into how is the Gmail thing working, remembering to check my email account every day, if I forget, or follow up on my chart from that university for doctor's appointments and things. Playing video games, I've got a PlayStation there that it's a nice little downtime activity. And then when I have my passes, one of the things I like to do is be able to go for walks. So like, for example, tonight I saved one of my passes from last weekend. So this evening, I get to go for a walk, just to kind of get out.
Sounds like you don't have any problem with downtime or boredom or lack of structure.
Yeah. I recognize that there has to be some me time, otherwise I'm doomed. Like, I can't just work and I can't just play. There has to be a balance in there. And what does that look like for me? So those are things that, granted, it's taken some time to figure out, well, what can I put into this schedule, or what do I need to take out of the schedule? And I think that's just acclimating from having such a structured schedule to now you can do whatever you want. What does that look like?
Sounds good.
I'm gonna make I'll move this just because we'll have you come back, but in September. But today would be a deny parole, obviously, and we would see you in the end of September, with the thought that you're going to really work on developing that comprehensive plan with some contingency options, tight budget, and so forth. Nailing down, I really would like to see, the some if then stuff around your activation of your support network. Who, under what circumstances? Just because I think if it's the more it's planned out and written out, the clearer it is, and the easier it is to access that. And obviously remaining discipline free, and then really taking the advice of slowing down where people see that becoming an issue, and checking that frustration stuff, because I just think, naturally we all feel it, but just what is that? Where is it coming from? And then how is it? How are you feeling it? One, and two, how does it look to others? That affect side that you talked about before.
Well, and that's a good part. And I missed that part of saying, so around the time of the letter submittals and things like that, I hadn't had a chance to have a mental health therapist.
Yeah.
Having that mental health therapist helps to keep that in line.
Yeah.
And I have those appointments going forward,
Good.
scheduled weekly or every other week, or, however the schedule provides, of course, but that's something that helps to keep that in balance too. So
Good. So that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
Can I just clarify, September 24th is a file review, but in person.
We would do a file review, but I'd like to have them here just in case we have questions.
I just want to make sure.
Yep. So it would be it gives us the chance to be able to chat with you if we have a question.
when you ask for the solid plan this time, don't give a 12-page report.
Yeah.
That's what I did last time. It was pretty heavy.
So to the motion, Board Member Earhart.
Yes.
Board Member Larson.
Yes.
Board Member Ramstad.
Yes.
And Schnell votes yes. A motion prevails. So we'll see you end of September. Continue to do good. And stay healthy and go from there.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you
See
guys' time today.
We'll see you then. All right. We have a couple of.
Enjoy those dogs.
Yes, ma'am.
Have a good walk.
It's
a beautiful day
Thank you,
for
sir.
it.
All right. See you later.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. We have a couple quick things just to wrap up on the agenda. And one is just, is there a motion to approve the April 29th, 25 meeting minutes?
So move.
There's a motion and a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other corrections? If not, we'll do this by. We have to do. I guess we have to do it by voice vote because of the video. So, Board Member Earhart,
I'm sorry.
you have to vote on approval of the.
Oh, yes.
Board Member Larson,
Yes.
Board Member Ramstad,
Yes.
and Schnell votes yes. So, minutes are approved from the 29th meeting. Anybody signed up? I don't believe so. Just verified. I don't see anybody else here. The next meeting of the Supervised Release Board is next Friday, 11:15 to 4:30 here at the DOC. Nobody? All right, perfect. And with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And we're adjourned. Thank you.
So I will send this week to a different date, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't remember when he's, I don't think he is.
I don't think so.
Yeah. So, just on this. We gotta work.